welcome everyone here today. We are going to talk about building community in the ELA classroom. Whether you're elementary, middle, or high, this session is for you. We really want to focus in on building that positive classroom community, especially during NTI. We know that it's more difficult now to do, but we've got some teachers in the district who are doing it and doing a great job of that. So I want to go ahead and get us started on the general stuff, because what we really want to hear from is our teacher panel. So in the ELA classroom, we really have 4 community building pillars. You can see them there. Trust and openness. We want our students to trust you and each other in order to engage. We know that in the ELA classroom, we talk about a lot of different topics and subjects, and sometimes we ask students to sort of reveal themselves or speak their minds, and we want that to be a safe place where they can trust you and each other. We want, because of those same reasons, we want a respectful and equitable environment where they feel safe and contributing members of that learning community that you build within your classroom. Rituals and routines make it a helpful learning space. It's more welcoming when things are familiar and predictable. They know what to expect within your virtual classroom. And we also want to honor those multiple ways for students to participate and learn within the classroom. We know that just having students visit with us where we talk at them the whole time is not really an engaging way for them to learn. So we want to think about different ways that we can engage them. So doing this work is going to take a mixture of adapting those old tried and true strategies that we used in our classroom that we knew worked into this digital strategy. So we're sometimes creating some new practices and activities to engage students. So part of that is creating some classroom norms. So I'm not going to read this entire slide to you, but you can see there on the left are those 4 pillars. And then on the right, we have created some we statements for students. This is a way to translating them into what students can do within the classroom to create that inviting, welcoming space. So we trust, if you think of trust and openness, we trust each other, we provide support and encouragement, we give time to think, we may critique the ideas but not the people. So these are some norms as a teacher that you might choose to use within your classroom to create that community. So you will have access to the slide deck, and you can go back and revisit this in ways that you can create those norms or add to what you've already created within your classroom. I want to go ahead now and get to our panel because we only have 30 minutes, and I really want for you to hear from them. They're the experts. I'm super excited to offer this different PD format rather than being the traditional where Jenni Aberli talks to you through some slide decks. You're actually going to hear from teachers today. Think of this next 20 minutes as this low budget yet YouTube worthy talk show where our guests might not be in the next blockbuster, but they are doing a job that's even harder. They're engaging students virtually in awesome language arts instruction within their classroom. So let me introduce our guests. We have Stefany Bibb, who is a kindergarten teacher from John F. Kennedy Montessori Elementary. We have LaKeesha Turner, who is a first grade teacher from Mill Creek Elementary, and Sara Butryn, who is a 9th grade teacher from Shawnee High School. I want to also let you know that we did have a middle school teacher scheduled to be here with us today, but unfortunately she was unable to be with us. So I just wanted you to know that we did have middle school representation, but life happens. And so we just, we still can move forward with the folks that we have because I know they're going to do a great job. So within our panel, we're just going to spend about 5 minutes focusing on each of our 4 pillars, and I'm going to give each of them an opportunity to talk about how they build classroom community within these pillars. So I'm just going to ask some questions, and I'm going to let you guys jump in and share for a couple of minutes on how you do this. So with pillar 1, we know that building trust and creating this space of openness are really hard to do in a virtual classroom, especially when all you're doing is seeing these little circles. A colleague of mine calls them M&Ms on the screen. So as you think about this, I would like for each of you to share what are some strategies or routines or procedures that you have in place to build trust with your students and your students with each other. Are there any great ideas or student stories that you have to illustrate your point? What does that look like for you in the classroom? Stefany, we'll start with you since you are our kindergarten teacher. My goodness. And these are students that are in school for the first time and you've never even met them. Talk a little bit about how you address this pillar with those little kindergartners that you've never seen in person.
Right, exactly. Kindergarten is scary enough in our normal without a pandemic. So virtually, it's even more intimidating to our little ones. And sometimes it doesn't even feel like they're actually going to school because they're still at home and they're just in front of a computer. So it was really important to me from the get-go, from the first day, to make sure that I was building a strong relationship with them. One of the things that we did as a class during the first week, if we were in the building, we were in the classroom, we would be setting up our room norms and our rules. Well, with my little ones, instead of using the word rules, I like to use the word promises. So what we did is we created promises because that is a word that really sticks to their heart. They like to keep their promises and their pinky promises. So we created promises that we would make to ourselves and to each other as a class when it came to our learning and being respectful to each other. I want to make sure that they knew that me being their teacher, that I valued their education, but I also cared about their social and emotional needs. So I connected with them, with their parents. Sometimes I would do a one-on-one Google Meet even before school started just to get to know them so they wouldn't be as nervous. Of course, we did a drive-by where I was able to see some of them and interact with them that way when they were picking up supplies. During our meetings, I want to make sure that they know that I'm welcoming their opinions. It's not just my classroom, it's our classroom. So I didn't want them to think it was just Miss Bibb just pouring out all this knowledge and they didn't feel comfortable enough to actually open up with their opinions or their thoughts or even their questions, because when you're a little kindergarten, sometimes you're scared to ask questions. So one thing that I wanted to do, because there were some students who were unable to meet me in the mornings, I created a family fun night. So every Thursday night from 6 to 6:30, we meet together. Now it's optional, it's not mandatory, but it helps build our community. And we do some fun things, we do some educational things, and it also helps gets the parent involved. One day, just recently, I had a parent who, bless her heart, she was at work, so she couldn't join in the meeting normally, but what she did was she had her cell phone on. Her child was in the meeting, she was at work, she propped her phone up, you see her with her goggles on, her work gloves on, and we were doing like a little dance contest. She walked by, she danced a little bit, and she keep going to work, but she was really engaged and involved. And building that trust with families helps my students build trust with me, because it's not just the student right now virtually, it's the whole family that I am engaging and involving with.
I love that, that idea of engaging the family and building that trust there, and creating experiences outside of the classroom setting that is fun to get to know one another. I know there are some high school teachers that are doing something called a lunch bunch, where they invite students in and they just hang out and talk with students and build that trust and relationship to get to know one another. Great idea for ways to get families involved. Thank you. Let's move on to LaKeesha. How can you build on that? What are some things that you do within your classroom to encourage participation in openness and trust?
Hello and good morning. And I echo everything that Ms. Bibb just said. That's wonderful. But I also, we also had like a back to school drive-by where students can come and pick up materials. And for those students that were unable to because of, parent work commitments or they were at daycare, I did work with families to set up like a drive-by where I would drive up and be in the driveway or outside of the home, and the student will look out the window and wave like, "Oh my gosh, there's Miss Turner." So just to kind of give that face to face, so that the first time they're not seeing me is not through a screen. It's even if it's through a window, but it's more personal that way. In our virtual classroom, every day to build up that esteem, that relationship, that trust, we do a daily affirmation. And they repeat Miss Turner, and then they say it, and then we call on a few of our friends to say it out loud, and then they challenge each other. Say it like you mean it. Say it like you mean it. And so it is so much fun. We do, whenever anyone shares out in our classroom, we show love. We raise the roof. We give spirit fingers. We give them a round of applause. Even if they're just sharing out something that they did over the weekend, they're answering a question, we want to show them some love because we know it's difficult in this virtual realm. Also, just like Ms. Bibb said, as far as establishing relationships with parents, a lot of our babies are not super tech savvy, so they are learning right along with their parents as well. And so we want to engage the parents and make sure that they're involved as well. So I do hold opportunities for just chats with parents and questions that you may have, any additional resources that you may need. Is there anything that we can do to make this experience just a little bit better for you? And speaking of lunch bunch, we have what's called a breakfast bunch. And so every Friday morning at 10 o'clock, you bring your breakfast to the screen. We talk, we have affirming Fridays. And so we just spend that time together. There's no schoolwork during our breakfast bunch. It's just a time to come together, to fellowship and enjoy breakfast together.
Great. I love that. Again, the trend of involving families and creating opportunities for kids to spend time together outside of the classroom setting, just getting to know one another. Thank you. And now we're going to move to Sara, who is our high school perspective, although I can certainly see how those elementary school strategies can work in any grade level. And I think that we'll see the same thing with what Sara has to share for high school.
Hi, everyone. And yes, I strongly agree with everything that I heard. And a lot of those things are also strategies that I use. When I was thinking about trust and openness, for me, it's two things, because one is the teacher in the room. We set the tone for the relationships that we want to have with students, and so if we want to have open and trusting relationships, we need to walk in with that. And again, I teach freshmen. So this year on NTI with these students, are coming from different middle schools. So they didn't know our school or one another. And I found we spend so much time checking in, and it's totally worthwhile. And be those morning conversations or regular like Google form check-ins to find out how they're feeling about their academics, how they're doing just socially and emotionally, to find out things that they like. I post one of those like every other week. But I think that that's helped a lot. And then implementing those things. And so showing them that like their voices do matter in the classroom and that we're using it. Oh goodness. One thing I wanted to share was, so yesterday I have office hours as well. So we have office hours on Wednesdays as a school, and I also have them on Tuesdays in the afternoon because I felt like they needed some afternoon time. And I had 3 students who were in, and one student, I had accidentally hurt her feelings in class because I had left her out of a conversation that she needed to be in. And so I apologized to her, and I explained that, I can be a bit of a hummingbird and then forgetful. And then the 2 other students who were in there jumped in to like help the situation. And they were like, yeah, she forgot me before, don't worry about it. And the other one was like, yeah, she even forgets to turn her mic on sometimes. And I just laughed. Like, it felt so good because it was that, we'd achieved that family environment where, they wanted to jump in and help, and they trusted that I hadn't meant to hurt the student. So it really, it's repetitive, right? Build relationships, focus on relationships, but there really is the foundation for these things to flow forth, I think.
Excellent examples. Thank you. And that's a great segue into our second pillar, where we want to build respectful and equitable classrooms where everybody feels safe and contributing members of that learning community. Let's start with LaKeesha on this one. LaKeesha, can you share some examples of how maybe a specific strategy that has worked for your students in creating a respectful and equitable environment? And is that a strategy that you use all the time? Do you change it up? What does that look like in your classroom?
Well, in the classroom, we were actually together in the classroom. We would have what's called one mic. And so that would be an opportunity for students to speak, and everyone, their eyes follow that person, their ears listening to that person, so that that person can share out and share their feelings, share their questions or their answers. In a virtual world, it's a little bit different. And so we do what's called eyes and tracking. And so that means you can't turn around, you're not looking to the side, you're not watching TV, your eyes are tracking, your eyes are looking at the person that's speaking. And so at that point, like, our hands are up, everyone is listening, because we want the person who has the floor to know what you say matters. Everyone has a voice. We want you to use it. But in this virtual realm, even though we're not together, I'm still listening to you. I still hear you. I want to hear what you want to say, and I respect what you're saying. So again, we're eyes tracking. That means our eyes are on you, our ears are listening, and everyone is wanting to hear what you have to say.
LaKeesha, I love that. I work in the high school world, and I know that it's a struggle to get high school students to turn their cameras on. So we often don't know at the high school level, are our students respectful? Are we paying attention? Are we listening? So that's a great strategy. And to add that it's showing respect for one another is something that I think a lot of our high school teachers can learn from and try to do with our students. Thank you. Since I just talked about high school, I'm going to move on up to Sara for this one. What are some strategies that you use, maybe a student story, around creating a respectful and equitable learning environment where all kids feel safe and as members of your classroom?
Well, I think that, like, most importantly, I need to show respect in order to expect that from our students. And I'm very open about my feelings and kind of what my non-negotiables are and what I'm sensitive to. And I think that helps set a good stage. Also, I think as a teacher, you do need to reflect on, like, what kind of relationship you want with your students. And that includes a reflection on hierarchy and positionality and authority. And I think that is a shift that we see as our students get older. A lot of times we might, as a teacher, take a more authoritarian stance. But then we still want students to be as trusting, as engaged, as respectful to us, even though we've kind of taken that away. So I think that's important to keep in mind. With NTI, it's been very interesting because I feel like it should have been more of a struggle, and yet I've had a lot of successes. So I'll share this. And speaking of cameras, for example, that was something that, like, I would sometimes get frustrated because I felt like I wasn't being respected. And I shared that with them, and so we came up with flash cam. And so, throughout the lesson, I shout out flash cam, and people either flash their camera or say something over the mic, or they put something in the chat, or they raise their little hand. It doesn't matter. The little hand in Google Meet, I mean. But then that lets me know that people are there. I feel respected, and I feel like that's worked really well for us.
I love that. So we've gotten a couple of very different strategies that are working for teachers and students to create respect. I want to jump down now to Stefany, who has our sweet little kindergartners, and hear about how you create opportunities for a respectful environment there?
Yes, ma'am. Now, when it comes to my classroom, my students, with them being so young and it can seem so intimidating to speak up and speak out, I make sure that we encourage each other. We cheer each other on. We have a habit of giving each other compliments on our thinking. We kiss our brains. We have hand signals when someone is answering. And even when they make a mistake, we still celebrate the mistakes because I'm teaching them that, you know what, mistakes are part of the process of learning. So mistakes are not a bad thing. So I don't want them to be shy or to decide that, oh no, I don't want to answer anything because it might be wrong. And we're also teaching them to the wait time. Now, the wait time has been a little bit of a struggle when it comes to virtually because it's different in the classroom. You know, I have to wait for my babies to mute and unmute, and then sometimes, you know, they got all these kids just looking at them on a screen, and it can be intimidating. So being mindful of that wait time and respectful of, okay, even though it's your turn, it's okay. You have enough time to process, to think, and then go ahead and give us an answer. One thing that we do is we have it kind of like LaKeesha said, an affirming word each day. And like right now, our word for this week, because we're going into the holidays and celebrations, our word, now it might sound big because our kindergartners are small, but we choose big words for big minds to do big things. And our big word this week is unprejudice. So we're talking about what unprejudice means and how you have to be open-minded to different things, and that each one of us, we have to respect our differences, and even not just culturally, but our learning differences. It might take another kid a little bit longer than you, and we're not going to rush them. We're going to be respectful. We're going to be equitable. And one of our promises that we made, like I spoke of in the beginning of the year, is we promised not to steal someone else's learning. So even though a student might know the answer, they know to be respectful and to wait and not to unmute real quick and yell at the answer, because we are being respectful and allowing that student an opportunity to learn.
I love that. Again, another great strategy with that word, kind of word of the week, and how to get kids to engage with one another and create that environment. Thank you. We're going to move on now. I'm looking at the time, and it is ticking away. To how do you create a familiar and predictable classroom in NTI? Anyone who knows me knows I am a huge fan of rituals and routines in the English classroom so that students come in and know what to expect. I hated when kids came into my classroom and they'd be like, are we doing anything today? Or what are we going to do today? That really wasn't the case for me because I had these rituals and routines within my classroom. So how do you create this cadence of learning for students during NTI? Are there specific strategies or routines that are really successful in your classroom to make this an environment where kids are ready to learn and building community? Let's start with Sara on this one.
So one thing I shifted away from with starting class is, instead of doing an opener, we have like a few minutes of chat time every day. And I think I'm glad I did that because now everyone is much more involved in discussion. And so that's something they know, that when they come to class for NTI, we're just going to be checking in and seeing how everybody's doing for the first few minutes. And they're welcome to just have chats in the chat box. And it's been interesting to think how to curate rituals and routines in a virtual space. And so I wouldn't have included how I designed assignments before, but like I find that I'm making sure I'm much more repetitive with the style of graphic organizer, for example. I want students to find comfort in the tools that we're using. And I think that's true of what we're using, like digital tools. I've really tried to keep the number low so that there are things we're using regularly and students can become comfortable with those as well. Also, we have our writer's notebooks, and that is something that they can rely on weekly. And then again, what I had mentioned before, we do a lot of check-ins regularly. And yeah, I think I'll finish there.
Okay, good. I love that. They're writing on a regular basis. You're checking in with them so that they know that you're helping keep up with where they are and what they're doing and providing that support for them. LaKeesha, what does that look like in your classroom?
Well, we start the day. Everyone who knows Ms. Turner knows that I love music. And so a lot of our day is spent with music, from our transitions in the classroom to transitioning virtually to music. And so I'll have normally I'll have like 2 songs that play within our 5-minute countdown until the day is ready to get started. So as they're logging in, there's music. Ms. Turner I have my camera on, I'm dancing, we're boogieing, we're having a good time, ready for our day. And so I use a slide deck every day, and they know, okay, once the welcome, we have a morning message, we have our class mission statement that we created together, our positive affirmation. They know that every day is assigned a day. So every day of synchronous learning, we have a theme for that day. So we have Math Monday, we have Share the Text Tuesday, where they have a shared reading. On Thursdays is Get Lit Thursday for an interactive read aloud. So they know on that day what's going on. And so before, where I've had to, I'll post it with a hashtag of what we have going on. There was one day that I put the wrong thing. It's Ms. Turner, today's Tuesday, it's Share the Text Tuesday. You still have Math Monday up there. And so they know what day it is and what to expect. And so just having that normalcy, if we were in the classroom, I would want the classroom to kind of run and function as if I wasn't there, that I'm merely just facilitating their learning. But in the virtual world, it can still happen. They know, again, the expectation and what's going on as far as our synchronous learning for each of those days and what the theme is for each of those days.
Great, thank you. And for the sake of time, we're going to move on to our 4th pillar, multiple ways to participate and learn. And since we've got about 3 minutes left, I'm going to ask each of you to just give us a quick, less than 1 minute response to ways that you engage students in multiple ways in reading and writing and speaking and listening. So we'll go ahead and start with Stefany on this one.
Okay, I'll try to talk as fast as I can.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. One thing for kindergartens with learning sentences, we do something called superhero swag. So I delivered little cakes and masks for them, and we participated, we worked together, and we learned superhero swag. We came up with sentences. They took turns, they collaborated. Another thing we did a favorite family food, where we did a Google slide deck, and each student had their own slide, and they contributed, collaborated with it. We created a book for the classroom. And then we also do a roundtable storytelling, where Ms. Bibb will start the story, and then each student takes a turn, and we work together to complete a story. It comes back to me, and then we end, and then we have our story.
Wow, that was awesome and quick and beautiful. Great ideas. How about you, LaKeesha?
In our virtual world, we collab on Jamboard. We use the chat feature on Meet. I also do what's called feedback surveys for both our students and our parents, because I want our students to give us some feedback. What did you think about that? We just finished our first project-based learning. We did animal habitats, and so doing that virtually, very different from doing that in the classroom. And so we wanted to make sure that it was equitable as far as having the materials and the items that they would need to complete. So again, having students give us feedback, but also having parents give us feedback, and also self-assessments, because one thing that I want is, what do you think? How do you think you did? Let's collab and let's talk together about ways that we can move forward as far as your learning. So we always want to make sure we're getting feedback from students and parents and allowing them to self-assess their learning.
Great, thank you. And Sara, what's your response for our speed round?
Well, I would say that I use Google Meets, and I really make use of the polls and the chat box a lot, and even the little hand raise function, because you can still get through a lot, even if students are too shy to speak. I love Jamboard. It's definitely the most used tool. We've been going back and forth with breakout rooms. I found that office hours have also been really great and just allow me to differentiate and give students more flexibility or time with assignments. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I want to thank everybody who joined us today, and a big special thank you to our panel. You all were amazing and gave us some great strategies and ways that you actually do the work in your classroom to build community. So we appreciate you and sharing your expertise. And for those of you who tuned in, hopefully you got some great strategies for building community in your ELA classroom.
Yes, thank you very much to the panel, Sara and LaKeesha and Stefany.